So one of the questions that we get a lot is, which bike are we going to ride for Dirty Kanza? Is it going to be the Salsa Warbird or the Salsa Cutthroat? We just wrapped up week 7 of our Couch to Kanza training, and we had a long weekend of riding. And on this week, we actually took out the Warbird. The previous weeks, we've been taking out the Cutthroat, but we wanted to switch it up a little bit and compare it to the Cutthroat so we can make that final decision. First off, a big disclaimer, these are opinions. So just because we ride these bikes doesn't mean your bike isn't awesome or beautiful. And just because we choose one bike over the other for us doesn't mean your choice is wrong. So don't get your feelings hurt if our opinions don't line up. So I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of the Warbird, since it's the bike we rode last and it's also the bike we've had the longest. So one of the first big pros is that generally it feels more aerodynamic. The geometry is a little bit more aggressive. You're really able to get down in the front end. So if you're facing a lot of headwinds, you can really tuck in. Another big plus is the bike is fairly quick handling, both in the rear and in the front, especially compared to the Cutthroat. The handling is a little bit more agile, and the rear end really gives you that kind of feedback. When you put in inputs into the pedals, the bike just wants to go. Another big plus is Warbirds that we have actually has lower gearing than the Cutthroat. It's set up as a 2x with a 11 to 36 cassette in the back. So lots of low gearing, which is important in the later stages of a long ride when you're tired and fatigued and you just need to spin up a hill. So what are the disadvantages of the Warbird? Again, this is our opinion. The first big disadvantage is, although it's a comfortable bike for us, we feel like over the longer term, I mean, we're talking hour 8, hour 10, hour 13, 15 maybe, the bike just isn't going to be that comfortable. Our longest ride this weekend was about 5 hours, and we were just starting to get some aches and pains that we weren't getting on the Cutthroat. Another disadvantage is tire clearance. When the Warbird was originally designed, I don't think the 40 millimeter tire width was really established back then. So right now I'm running the WTB Riddlers, which measure in about 43 millimeters, and the clearances are tight. If there was any mud whatsoever in the rear end, I would be grinding to a halt. So that's a Warbird. Let's look at the Cutthroat. So one of the big advantages of the Cutthroat right off the bat is the comfort. It's a comfortable bike, both in terms of the vibration dampening of the carbon, but also the geometry as a whole. It's a little bit more upright, less arrow road tuck, although you could certainly set up the bike like that if you were really dedicated to it. But generally, overall, when we hop on the Cutthroat, we feel like we can ride for days without getting a sore back, sore neck, or anything like that. Another big advantage of the Cutthroat is it's got mud clearance for days. Even with the stock 2.35 tires, there's lots of just area around the tires to shed mud. I recently put on some 40 millimeter tires just to see how the bike would ride. And when it's set up with those tires, there is just ridiculous amounts of mud clearance. So no problems of tire rub or mud rub if things get really tacky. I think another big pro and con is that it's set up 1x. There's just less mechanical stuff to go wrong, really simple shifting. That said, that also bridges into the con territory insofar as I feel like the stock gearing that came on the Cutthroat isn't quite low enough. It's certainly not low enough for bike packing in our opinion, but also I feel like in those later hours when you hit those double-digit grades, there's just not enough gears to spin up comfortably. So that's something we're actually going to look at, either somehow cram in a 1x12 in the back or modify something so we have a bigger cassette in the rear for lower gears. So another con for us in terms of the Cutthroat is that the bike overall is just a little bit slower than the Warbird. There's this part on our ride where we usually pass this tree at about the 55-minute mark. On the Warbird, we'll pass that tree about 10 to 12 minutes earlier. So I don't know if that's an issue of aerodynamics or of just we're rolling with the bigger tires on the Cutthroat, but it is noticeably slower, and over time, especially over the course of 10 to 15 hours, that time adds up. That's not to say you can't go fast on the Cutthroat. There are tons of people way faster than us that just kill it, but with our riding style and our opinions, once again, it is a tad bit slower than the Warbird. So which bike are we actually going to ride for Dirty Kanza? I think this past weekend was a real eye-opener riding the Warbirds after riding the Cutthroats. First off, we realized how fun the Warbirds are, but also really made us think about what our bike priorities are for Dirty Kanza. Realistically, neither Laura and I are going to be at the front end of the group. So straight out top end speed isn't a huge priority. I think for us, just finishing the ride and not feeling absolutely destroyed, we're going to count that as a victory. So our bigger priority over speed is actually comfort. And if you look at it in those terms, the Salsa Cutthroat is the more comfortable bike to us. So as of now, as of week 7 of our Couch to Kanza training, we're leaning heavily into taking the Salsa Cutthroats with us to Dirty Kanza. But we are going to mod it out a little bit differently. I think we're going to experiment with kind of smaller tires than the 2.35s that it ships with. I just put on some 40mm tires to see how that affects the handling of the bike, if it makes it feel weird or if it drops it down too low. We may go up from there, either a 50mm tire or something in that ballpark. We don't know. It's an evolving process. Another issue that we're going to have to figure out eventually is how to get lower gears on the Cutthroat without going into a double, because that just means added expense of not only the front derailleur and another crankset, but also another shifter, which is where it really gets expensive. So what are our options in terms of expanding the gearing and keeping it one by? Don't know, gonna figure it out, but that's where our thoughts are. So right now, both bikes are awesome bikes. I think we'll probably still train with both bikes for shorter rides, quicker rides. Us personally love the Warbird, but I think for a longer event like DK, where it's a lot of time in the saddle, we're going to lean towards the Cutthroat right now as of week 7 of Couch to Kanza. Things may change. It's all organic. Right, so that's it for this week's Couch to Kanza update. Next week is a little bit of an active rest week. We don't have super long rides, but we're still riding a lot. And we're just counting the days until Dirty Kanza. So if you guys have any questions, leave those in the comments below. Try to answer them. And until next time, thanks for following, and ride bikes, travel, and do good.